to get started, one of the first questions like that like really highlighted for me, you decided to step away from going to med school to pursue entrepreneurship. What was that, like 22 years old, right?
I was 22.
Okay. In a world where, and how old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 41.
Okay. So you look great for 41, by the way. Could not tell. But in a world where AI wasn't even a forethought, the internet was still kind of like coming into his own type of thing. What conviction did you have at 22 that most might not even have today? Just like, especially because at that time, med school is like, this is the most prestigious thing you could probably do.
Yeah. It's funny. This was back in the college Facebook days. Sure. Like you had to have a college email address to be able to get on Facebook. So I'll say it this way. I was really fortunate. My dad was a general contractor. He was a custom home builder. And so I grew up in a home where my dad was the boss, meaning he had the flexibility and freedom of being an entrepreneur. That's a tough industry. It's kind of feast or famine. But I got to see firsthand what it looked like for somebody to own a business and how that impacted the family.
Sure.
My mom got to be home with her 3 kids. That was meaningful to me. So I was pretty good at math and science. And so if you're good at math and science and you want to make 6 figures or more, you become a doctor. Or so they tell you that's what you should do, because that's what successful people do. So I started down that path. And so straight A's in high school, straight A's in college, passed the MCAT. And then somebody told me that, like, are you sure that like what you think medicine is in your mind is actually medicine, like day-to-day life of a doctor? And at that point, I had an idea in my mind of what I thought medicine looked like, but I didn't really know. So per some advice of a mentor, I decided to do 200 hours of interning with 4 medical groups. I got to the end of that internship and I realized medicine was not for me. I saw the lifestyle of the doctors. I felt like that was not necessarily the calling on my life. And so I wanted to figure out some other strategy.
Do you mind giving me insight before you move on? Like what does that day-to-day actually look like? And why did it turn you away so much?
So it's interesting. Orthopedic surgeon was kind of what I thought I would be.
Sure.
They call it the carpenter of surgeons. I watched these orthopedics do incredible, amazing work, but they saw their kids less than a half hour a day. I shadowed a trauma surgeon. Some of his surgeries went 12 or 14 hours. I shadowed an ophthalmologist, and Medicare had come along and was now controlling his rates. So he was arguably the best cataract surgeon in Illinois. At that time, he was charging about $3,500 per cataract surgery. Medicare came along and said that surgery is worth $600. So he was doing 2 to 3 times the number of surgeries he was previously and making half as much money as he once was.
Sure.
I shadowed gastroenterologists. I shadowed guys that were in hospitals, group clinics, and even private practices. In all of the scenarios, it was like the lifestyle of the physician was not something I envied. So I do believe that God calls some people to medicine. I just didn't feel like that was the calling on my life. So at that point, it was like, well, crap, I wish I would have figured this out sooner. I took the organic chemistry and the physics and all the hard courses. I passed the MCAT, and now I was kind of left wondering, what should I do? And I'm sure young people would relate to this. It also felt like saying yes to med school meant saying no to everything else. I was still an aspiring football player at that time, trying to get to the NFL. I had some acting contracts in Chicago, so I did some radio and commercial work. I was in a movie with Dennis Quaid and Rob Brown and some great actors, and so I thought maybe I can kind of scratch that itch a little bit. Who knows where that'll go? I did some personal training, so it was kind of like I had my foot in a lot of different camps. Mm-hmm. But I think young people are afraid to commit to one thing because they're not sure what the thing is that they want to do. So I could probably relate to that in a lot of ways, but I knew for a fact that I didn't want to go to med school. The question was, if I'm going to do something else, how do I make a comparable income to a doctor was the question mark I had. And fortunately, I ended up going to coffee with a cardiothoracic anesthesiologist, and he introduced me to the world of direct sales. And he had 4 kids at the time. He was still a practicing physician. And he said, Jordan, you're considering getting into medicine. I'm trying to get out of medicine. I think I'm going to be able to accomplish that through the industry of direct sales. And I thought, man, I don't really know if I could be successful at that. I'd never seen it done correctly. I had my own weird opinions of that industry, but I thought if this doctor is doing this as a business, there must be some legitimacy to it. So I ended up partnering with him, and that was kind of how I stepped into entrepreneurship. And that was almost 20 years ago.
So let's, I want to hear your interpretation. Someone who's been very successful in the world of direct sales, network marketing, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions about that industry. And I can personally attest to it because I've had exposure. It was my first experience with entrepreneurship as well, it was awesome because the amount of personal development that you gain in such a quick amount of time.
Oh, yeah.
You need to be able to deal with rejection pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So like, help me understand your interpretation of, in a world where social media wasn't as adamant about the industry itself, what your conception of network marketing was versus what it actually is in the world of direct sales.
Let me start by saying it this way. Business is about problem solving. And so when I considered my first company, and it was USANA Health Sciences. I mean, they're a publicly traded company, still very successful company today. I saw a problem and a solution. And so when I started considering first the business model, I saw a huge expanding market in wellness. I think we'd all agree. Wellness is an expanding market. I saw unique and consumable products, meaning I saw an opportunity to offer products that were unique, but also consumable, meaning repeat business. I also saw an issue where timing was inevitable. I saw people were looking for, home-based income opportunities, and they were also looking for solutions to their wellness. And then fourthly, I saw an opportunity to create leverage. And leverage is absolutely a necessity if you want to create a large residual income type opportunity. So I grew up where my mom did Mary Kay. She did Pampered Chef. She probably did a couple more that I'm forgetting. But I had never seen network marketing done correctly. True. It was almost like you got to invite people over to your house and sell stuff, and your friends don't really want it, but they buy it because they feel bad for the person hosting the party. That was my perception of network marketing. But this doctor helped me to see things differently. And as somebody that wanted to go into medicine, I saw some of the issues with medicine. I felt like the trajectory of the economy in the world was moving in a direction of preventative medicine, AKA wellness. So I saw how the products I was going to offer could be a huge solution to people's problems. And I liked that particular company was the first company to offer nutraceuticals, meaning they were under the category of supplements, but they were manufactured following drug standards. And so I saw a credible opportunity, but to your point, I was dealing with the opinions of people that had heard of Herbalife and Amway and some of the more legacy companies. And so they kind of like had fixated in their mind that like, this is one of those things. And so I ran up against that a lot. As you can imagine, when I started as a 22-year-old, I was talking to mostly other 22, 23, 24-year-olds. And so they had very little money and they had very little vision for the future. And so the first 2 years in the direct sales industry was really hard for me. I felt like the rate at which I got people to participate was the rate at which people quit. And so it felt like this revolving door. And people said, well, if you just hang in there, you're going to be successful. And I was like, this is not working. And I remember sitting down with my sponsor, the doctor, Dr. Steve was his name. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, Jordan, if you were a year and a half, 2 years into medical school, how much money would you have made? And at that point I was doing the math. I was like, gosh, I'd be $80,000 in debt with 2 years of medical school left. I will have made no money. In fact, I probably wouldn't start making money until my early 30s. And so he said, so you haven't made much in network marketing. I know you're frustrated, but like, let's just get some perspective here. Like, the reason that a doctor makes what a doctor makes is because when they get to the end of medical school, they have skills the average person doesn't have. And he said, the marketplace pays for value, and what determines your value in the marketplace are your skills. So what skills do you have? I thought to myself, I don't have any skills. I'm just winging it. And I realized at that moment, I needed to go develop some skills, more specifically, people skills. So I don't care, whoever's listening to this, I don't care what business you're in. If you make money, you deal with people. And if you can improve your people skills, you can make more money. So I got very intentional at improving my people skills. So I started reading more and listening more and attending events. I went to Tony Robbins events. I went to Darren Hardy events. I started studying Covey, and I started studying all of these different, Jim Rohn. I mean, the list goes on. I started studying so that I could add more value to the people that I was working with and wanted to work with. And so by the age of 24, things started to turn in the right direction. And I ended up that next year making over 6 figures in the network marketing industry. And so I think what happened was my confidence and belief started to increase. So rather than when rejection would come my way or somebody would come to me with their negative opinions of network marketing because their mom was doing it awfully as well, it stopped bothering me as much as it did in the beginning. And I started to, I kind of went on this crusade to try and help people have a more appropriate opinion of what the industry could be. And so I think it went from like when I started to everybody kind of had a negative stereotype of the industry to now having participated in the industry for 20 years. I rarely hear people say network marketing doesn't work. They might say it's not for me, but I think there's enough credibility and enough examples of people that have made it work that I feel like people's opinions have changed in a positive way.
Why do you think people still are like scared to be very direct with what they do? Because like, for example, I still get approached in the network marketing space and people dance around what the actual opportunity is. Like, why is it that? Because like, if you look at it, if you peel the onion back, in my opinion, like it almost seems like they're afraid to share, or like to talk directly about the opportunity, which obviously comes off that way energetically. Why are people afraid to talk about it?
I think some of that's probably a little bit of strategy. So let's just say somebody is a representative of Shackley, just as an example. They've got tens of thousands of distributors. So if a person comes on their socials and just says, I'm with Shackley and this is what I sell, a prospect watching that video is just going to go to Shackley.com and they're going to research it. They're going to form an opinion. They might even buy from the company website. And then that person doesn't receive credit for building their business. Sure. So I do think some people are trying to generate some level of curiosity for 2 reasons. One, so that they can build their own portfolio. But then also they want to make a connection with the interested party and help them work through the information as opposed to letting that person process it through, videos and their own personal research.
Yep, that makes sense.
So that's probably why most people are a little bit more, I guess I would say it's curiosity marketing is probably in most cases why people choose to do that.
That makes sense. Now, fast forward 20 years from when you started, you built this successful business. How actively do you still participate in that space?
Yeah, so good question. So that first opportunity I was in that company for 13 years. I built a team of over 13,000 distributors in 20 plus markets. It was a ton of fun. And yet my conscience told me roughly around 2015 that like, I knew that the newest person joining in the US market was not being set up to win. So I knew that it was time for me to leave. The problem was, you might have heard of the term golden handcuffs. It's kind of like you're making too much money to walk away.
Sure.
I attempted to sell my business and I was not allowed to do that. And so I felt like what I had to do was simply resign. And so I turned off my commission checks. I self-terminated from the business. I left on as good of terms as I possibly could. And I decided to find a new venture. And so my wife and I in 2020 helped to start a new network marketing company. If you guys remember COVID, we launched that company 3 days before COVID. So we dealt with the challenges of COVID and launching a company. Our first daughter was born 6 months before that. So we were just like, oh my gosh, this is just overwhelming. It was a really challenging year. We ended up, that company ended up being acquired. And I was kind of left in a position figuring out like, I've got some other income streams now. Do I want to keep in this industry? Do I want to get out? And I kind of kept feeling like I want to get out. But I felt like the Lord kept pulling me back. And a great friend of mine, Justin Prince, introduced us to another opportunity, and we decided to participate with him. So we joined a company with Justin, and we did more revenue in 3 years than I did in 13 years at my first company. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But then fast forward, we wanted to start our own company. And so Justin Prince is the founder of Make Wellness, and he approached my wife and I. Obviously, we were great friends and former business partners, and he wanted our fingerprints on that business. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to start over again. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, isn't the whole point to network marketing that you build a residual income? Like, who wants to start over?
Sure.
But I felt like the business we were participating in at that time was terminal. I knew it wasn't going to last. And so this is one of the things for anybody that's considering direct sales. I was involved in a publicly traded company. I was involved with a company that was owned by private equity. And so in both of those scenarios, I would say I had a shaky ownership foundation. Think of it this way. If, like, let's just say you're going to build a custom home. You put your sweat, equity, and tears into that custom home. You build it just the way you want it to be built. I mean, you've got your Pinterest board, you've got it all designed, you've got the layout of the house. Let's just say you build this baller house and you're so proud of your custom home. And then all of a sudden, an inspector comes along and he's like, hey, the house is beautiful, but I'm so sorry. There's cracks in the foundation. You can't live in this house. You would be absolutely devastated. Because you did everything you could and you controlled everything you could control to build this perfect house, but there was a faulty ownership foundation. That's how I felt in network marketing. I felt like I did the hard work to build an organization, and things outside of my control left me frustrated and hurt. And so I said, if I'm ever going to participate in this industry again, I am not going to do it on a faulty ownership foundation. And so my friend Justin owns the company. I read the operating agreement. I know what the cap table looks like. I felt like if I build this business with Justin, we can build a legacy business. And so my wife and I helped launch that company in October of 2024. And we did 100 million in sales inside of our first 11 months. Credit to an incredible team, an incredible ownership team, our leadership team, all of it. So that is a business that my wife and I do together. We are day in and day out helping our organization to grow. We are on the advisory council, helping the leadership team to make great decisions for the company. So we're definitely involved. We just hosted an event last week in Orlando with 1,600 affiliates, and it was a great event and great growth opportunity. There are some other businesses that I'm a part of, but I feel called to, number one, like helping Make be the best that it can be. But I also feel an obligation to the people that are participating in our organization. Like, I know that if I show up at my highest level, I can help them to be the best versions of themselves. So that is a business that my wife and I absolutely enjoy building. And I mean, goals wise, we did 100 million in year one, which if you do the research, I mean, if you go look up Amazon and some of these giant companies that everybody knows, like, companies don't do 100 million in year one. Yep. We did 100 million in year one, and our goal is to do 1 billion by year 5. If we do those two things, we will be the first company in history, not inside of direct sales. I'm saying, generically speaking, of all companies that you research, no company's ever done that before. So we have some pretty lofty goals for our organization to be able to accomplish those numbers.
That's great, man. Well, thank you for sharing the whole story, and congratulations on the growth and the evolution of it. Now, it seems like, because you talk about this concept of success versus significance a lot, and it seems like that was like your journey from success to significance, where like, and funny enough, significance equals significantly more success in every lens as well. Yep. Can you break that down, kind of like where that concept evolved within that journey?
Yeah. So I would say success is adding value to yourself. Significance is adding value to others. And you'll find people that will go through this kind of process. They're totally focused on just achieving their own success. But we all know people that have achieved high levels of success, and they're left feeling empty and unfulfilled. And I feel that is because our highest calling is significance. I think that we're all designed to serve and add value to others. And so you'll meet people that are successful that aren't significant, but you'll never meet somebody who's significant that's not successful. And so I felt like I had achieved enough monetary, worldly success that it was like, how can I shift my focus to more of a significant mindset? And that led, to me writing a book about it. Conceptually, the story of significance for me was this story of this red key. And I don't know if that story would be helpful, but I'm happy to share it.
Sure.
Yeah. So the short story was, when I was 13, a youth pastor challenged me to remain sexually pure. And he gave me a red key that night, and along with 200 other youth group people. I mean, we were all 7th and 8th grade. And I took that red key home, and I was like, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to stick to this challenge. So I took that red key and I put it in a safe in my drawer where only I knew where it lived. And that little red key, it was just a house key painted red. It stood as a symbol of a decision that was made by a young boy. And I was going to remain sexually pure. My goal was to give that key to my wife one day. And so fast forward, it took me almost 20 years to find my wife. But on our wedding day, I was 31. I gave that red key to my wife. And so I tell people that the purest decisions in life are actually the decisions that we make on behalf of other people, even before we know their name. The tears that strolled down my wife's face on our wedding day wasn't because I gave her a red key. It was because she realized that I had made a decision as a 13-year-old boy that was now impacting her life. And it really resonated with her heart. You could see it in her face. It was just like he made a decision and committed to a decision and stayed true to that decision for almost 20 years. And now I'm the beneficiary of that motivation that he had for this decision. And so the same is true for building a business. How can you treat your customers at a higher level? How can you treat your coworkers at a higher level? How can you serve your kids at a higher level? Like, what does it really look like to serve others? And I think that until you learn how to really add value and serve others, until you can learn how to do that, you'll always be chasing this successful race and feeling left unfulfilled. But all of a sudden, when you start figuring out how to add value to others, you actually become more significant, but you also become more successful. And that's what I realized. The direct sales industry obviously taught me that. Zig Ziglar said, help other people get what they want and you'll get what you want. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to focus on helping other people win. And as I started helping other people win, all of a sudden I felt like I was winning. And that's kind of the lens that I look through now. I mean, we're making enough income from Make that I don't have to build that business anymore. In fact, I could retire from that business if I want to. But that's looking through the lens of success, not the lens of significance. If I look through the lens of significance, it's like, no, when my wife and I show up and we serve at a high level, we add value to the company, we add value to the reps, we add value to the customer base, and like we can help this thing grow, which in essence helps all of these represented families to see more success.
Sure.
And so as best I can, I try to live a life of significance and encourage others to do the same.
Do you think it starts with all of our own version of our own red key? Because in order to serve people at least this is my belief, in order to serve people at the highest level, I have to first take care of myself as well.
Yes.
Because I don't want to pour from an empty cup, essentially. So does it start with all of our own proverbial red keys, and there's some level of discipline we have to get to a point where we can pour successfully into others?
Yeah, so I would put it in, if one was taking notes, I'd tell you to write these 3 words down: be, find, build, in that order. Be, find, build. So be starts with leading yourself. If you don't first lead yourself, you're going to have a hard time leading others. And so it does start with becoming more. The second thing is finding others, right? So I don't care if you're a financial advisor, if you're a CPA, if you're in sales. You've got to find clients. You've got to find people to work with. And so we want to find others, and then build is then learning to lead leaders. Maybe you have a sales organization, or maybe you're a C-suite executive, or maybe you're building out a team of some kind. You've got to learn to lead leaders, but it has to be in that order. And so people will come to me and they'll be like, hey, Jordan, I have this goal of making $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million a year. I want to achieve this rank or this title. What do I need to do is the question they ask me. And I'm like, let's reframe that. Not what do I need to do? The better question is, who must I become? And I found that as I became more through personal development, through growth, through attending masterminds and events and seminars and bettering myself, I showed up as the best version of me. And when you show up as the best version of you, you lead and live differently, which means you begin to attract differently. And I started to attract a higher caliber of leader. I started to attract a different type of friendship. My friend circle changed, my business changed, but this is a constant evolving process. It's funny, I keep leveling up even the events and masterminds that I attend, and they keep getting more expensive. But the reason that I keep going and spending the money and attending these events is because I want to level up the people I'm around. There are people that are just more successful, that think bigger, balance their time better. There's just constantly people to learn from and grow from. And so I want to be in those rooms. I want to be around those types of people so that I can level up myself and hopefully level up the people around me.
And the irony with those masterminds, like the more expensive they get, sometimes the more valuable they are at the same time, right? So it's like, it's not, there's not a direct correlation to like it being less valuable when you spend more money. A lot of the times you're actually getting a better deal because you are paying more monetarily.
1,000%. I mean, I tell people you're one connection away from a different life.
Yep.
One person could make an introduction, share an idea, share an investment, share a business opportunity, share a parenting tip, a marriage tip. I mean, the sky's the limit for what you could gain from one single human being. And so that's why I constantly am trying to grow my network.
And that's why the B is so important too, so that you can be ready when that opportunity comes, so that you can steward it well. What are some of the dark sides of it all? So a lot of awesome things, but share with me some of the dark moments along the way.
Yeah, there have been a lot of dark moments. You know, a lot of times these types of podcasts and social media clips, you see people's highlights. There's been a lot of challenges. One of my greatest challenges is I guess I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, or I'm a driver, depending upon what personality quadrants you study. I'm a competitive, goal-oriented person. And so sometimes throughout my career, I'm so driven that it feels like I'm chasing whatever the thing is, and I end up compromising the things that matter most to me in the pursuit of whatever the goal is. And so I have to always make sure I'm aware of that so that I don't compromise my values in the things that matter most to me. Another big challenge my wife and I went through after we had our daughter, Kinley, she's now 6. We had some fertility challenges. Our first miscarriage, my wife was 12 weeks. It was devastating. She had a DNC, and you can't even put into words the feeling that we went through. These big giant hopes of growing our family, and to feel like it just was taken away from us was hard. And then the journey got even harder. Following our first miscarriage, we ended up having 7 more miscarriages over the course of the next 4 years. It was devastating. It was hard. I felt like as a man, I was hopeless in what I could do to support my wife. But my wife is one of the most resilient, strong-willed, incredible human beings that I've ever met. And so she wouldn't give up on finding what the issue was. So to anybody that's been through fertility challenges, I think this will maybe relate to you. Like, you know, we went to the traditional medicine type people, and they were trying to like put a Band-Aid on the problem. A reproductive immunologist wanted to shut down her immune system. And then the fertility clinics wanted us to do IUI and IVF. And it was like, I got to see the medical system at its worst. Rather than like trying to figure out what the root cause was, Kristen's body was miscarrying. Why? We need to know, why is she miscarrying? There has to be something wrong. This body is so beautifully designed that like, if it's miscarrying, there's something wrong. And fast forward, my wife built a team around her. She was relentless in trying to figure out what to do to be able to have a second child. And she ended up finding this facility in Greece called Fertilisis, and Fertilisis was able to provide us with some answers. So we didn't even get the answers from inside the States. We had to go outside of the States to get the answers. Anyhow, we made a few adjustments. She went on a round of antibiotics, and we ended up getting pregnant, carried to full term, and my son Koa was born last July. And we call him our little miracle baby. So, you know, even though there's a pretty large gap between Kinley and Koa, which wasn't what we planned for, it was all part of our journey. And I feel like God has brought couples and individuals into our lives.
I knew that was going to happen.
It's all good.
Yeah, I don't think the mic will pick it up.
So God brought couples into our lives that we were able to mentor and come alongside and just kind of help them through the process, because statistically they say 1 in 4 women miscarries. I think the stats might even be close to 1 in 3. And I think some of that are lifestyle choices, some aren't, but anything that we can do to help people in their own fertility journey is now something that's really something that we pursue. So
sure,
those are just some of the challenges. Obviously, entrepreneurship has its challenges. Starting and stopping businesses, starting over, that creates challenges. Right now, I run a consulting company and I have the direct sales business. So, you know, sometimes managing my time throughout the day, you know, what is the best yes? You'll see that the more successful you become, the more opportunities are presented to you. You have to get better at saying no to things. And I'll never forget, Warren Buffett said, he has the rule of, for every 100 opportunities that come to him, he says no to 99 of them. He says yes to 1. And it feels uncomfortable to say no because it feels like you can see the upside to the opportunity. But I've gotten a lot better at saying no to things so that I can save my best yes for the things that we want. I also think, you know, a tip that might help is like when you're evaluating any sort of business or opportunity or something like that, I have an acronym ILI that I evaluate. So it stands for income, lifestyle, and impact. So I'm not just looking at the income opportunity of whatever the thing is. Yes, the income is important, but what's the cost of creating that income, AKA lifestyle? So one of the reasons I've liked working from home and having the businesses that I've had is because I remain in control of my schedule. My wife and I are going to go to Hawaii with our family for 3 weeks. We can work from Hawaii. We can work from, you know, Tennessee or California or wherever we may be traveling. We homeschool our daughter. So the lifestyle component is very important. And then thirdly is impact. Not just like what's in it for me. You know, you can do businesses that are transactional, but like, what's the return on impact for participating in whatever this opportunity is? And so that's kind of the 3-way filter that I look through things when I'm evaluating a yay or nay to saying yes to an opportunity.
Yeah, it's a great filter. And like, if you say yes to everything, you're objectively saying no to potentially better opportunities. And I think, you know, it's jaded because this is common at this point. You see a lot of this people talking about this on social media. When you're first starting out, like you kind of have to be a little bit of a yes man. Like if you could figure out discernment early on, great. But I can't.
Beggars can't be choosers in the beginning.
Right. So you just say yes. And then you eventually get to a point of overwhelm where you actually have to, you finally put your hand on the stove, realizing that you can't say yes to everything.
That's right.
So my default has almost become no, so that it opens up the opportunities to yes, because I've done the other way around. Going back to the, thank you for sharing, by the way, the miscarriage journey. That's 7 in a row. I could not imagine. Now, 7, you know, when you're in the midst of that, what are the conversations you're having with God? Like, is there a point where you're ever thinking like, maybe this just isn't meant to be anymore? Like help me understand some of the conversations that's going on in your head and with God as a man of faith.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like men and women process differently. You know, every time my wife would get pregnant, obviously there's hormones and so forth that are released in order to make that happen. And then when the body miscarries, then there's a fall off of hormones. So it was like this cycle of my wife's, it was not just an emotional toll, it was a physical toll on her body. And then as you can imagine, the trauma of like each time you get pregnant, wondering, is it going to be sustained or is it going to go away? And I remember even when we were going through the pregnancy process with Koa, she just, no matter how many weeks along we were, she just kept thinking something's not going to go right. Something's going to happen. And I remember it was like she could never calm down. Her nervous system was always on high alert. And so I don't want to presume that like my emotions were the same as my wife's, because she was processing it in her own way. I would say for me, it's crazy, but like I had this supernatural peace. I hated seeing my wife hurting, but I don't know why. It's just kind of like I had this peace and I had this joy that like God was in control and he could see something that I couldn't see. And so each time there was a miscarriage, obviously I was empathetic for my wife, but I was like, okay, Lord, this hurts. But like, I have to believe that you have some ultimate plan. You can see something and understand something that I can't. And I dove into scripture and I read stories like the story of Job. And Job said, you know, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I will return. The Lord gives and he takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So I thought to myself, you know what? As much as this stings, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Lord, I will still bless you. I will still praise you, even in the midst of my trials. And I don't feel like my faith ever wavered in those dark days. Fast forward, I now have the most incredible son, Koa. He's going to be 8 months tomorrow. And I'm like, if we hadn't gone through what we went through, Koa wouldn't probably be here. Like, Koa is here because of what we went through. I also know that I have 8 babies waiting for me in heaven. And you know, it's funny. I have lots of friends that have multiple kids, and I like to remind them that, like, on the other side, I have 8 babies waiting for me. So I hope to spend eternity with 10 kids, you know, not just the 2 that I know on this side of heaven. So I'm constantly aware. I have an eternal perspective of what's happening. And as much as I would have loved to be in relationship with those 8 babies here, I have an eternal perspective knowing that I will spend eternity with those 8 babies.
That's great, man.
So I think that gets me through it.
Do you think your journey of the red key and the amount of discipline that you had to go to build this like really rock solid foundation of faith throughout the years, do you think it prepared you for these moments?
I do. You know, it's funny. People like, when the people hear that I was a virgin when I got married, I guess that's super rare. People are like, oh my gosh, it must have been so hard. And it's kind of like, it actually wasn't hard. You know what I'm saying? Like when you have clarity and focus on a goal, you're locked in. So even though I was with pretty girls, I dated pretty girls, opportunities presented themselves. It was like, it's not worth giving up my red key for this momentary pleasure. Not to mention, I knew how it would affect them and it would affect me. And I had aspirations in athletics and academics and business. And I was like, anything that could possibly go wrong by, you know, being with a woman, I was just like, I'm not willing to do that. And so it's funny, you go back to the foundation of faith. The Bible says that God wants us to be with one woman in a holy covenant through marriage. And so it's like, he doesn't just say that because he's trying to make us miserable. It's like, no, he actually knows that's for our best interest. And so for me, I was really grounded on what the Bible said and what God wanted. And so it didn't feel like this mean God up in the sky telling me do's and don'ts. It was more of like I had the roadmap for a successful life. He just laid it out for me. And so I felt like I saved myself a lot of trauma, a lot of headache, a lot of heartache by just trying to do things the way he told me to do things. And so, yeah, the red key taught me about perseverance and faithfulness, such that when these challenging trials came up, and the Bible is very clear that trials are coming, trials will come, I felt very adequately prepared to like weather those storms. And I feel like, you know, if you're listening to this and you're going through a wilderness season right now, I sometimes feel like God takes us through the wilderness to really teach us something, to really remind us of his goodness. You know, you think of the story of the Israelites going through the wilderness. It's like they went through the wilderness for 40 years, and it says that God used the wilderness to test and to see what was in their hearts. And then on the backside of the wilderness was the promised land. I think God sometimes takes us through wilderness seasons to get to the promised land. And so even dating a girl for 2 years and her breaking up with me, my heart was broken through a breakup in my 20s. And at the time, it felt like my whole world was collapsing. But now I look back and I'm like, she was not meant to be my wife. And Kristen, who is my now wife, was like, God knew that I was supposed to be with Kristen. But at the time, it felt like my world was ending. And I meet teens and early 20s, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm devastated. I'm single. I broke up with so-and-so. I was like, you feel anxious. You feel overwhelmed. It's because like that is a wilderness season that you're going through. But if you can like rise above the wilderness season and try to have an eternal perspective, ask yourself the question, what is God teaching me through this hard time? And I think that's where you start to grow your faith and grow some resilience. And you start to trust that like God is ultimately in control and you can count on him for that.
What advice do you have for people that have lived a life of sexual impurity and maybe feel called to a journey of purity, but they've, you know, they haven't had the benefit of like never having had sex before, asking for a friend? You know, what does that, you know, what advice do you have for those types of people that want to walk a different path, but like feel like they've already kind of screwed it up, if that makes sense?
Well, first of all, I believe in grace and I believe in forgiveness. And so I don't care who you are or what you've done. To anyone listening to this, grace and forgiveness are for you. And so I don't think that you should be living in shame or guilt or condemnation for decisions in your past. I would start there. You know, ultimately, I believe Jesus came to give us freedom, and there's freedom in living and experiencing what God designed for us. So we live in this fallen world, and you know the Bible's very clear that there are things that we can't see. There are supernatural forces of good and evil. So whether you believe in angels or demons or what or not, it's like the point is you look at any good movie that you've ever watched, it's good versus evil. There is good and evil in the world. And so we are constantly bombarded with temptation. We're constantly bombarded with the world kind of pointing us in the direction of sin and evil. And so my encouragement would be, don't beat yourself up for what you've done in the past. What you need freedom. You need to break through. And if you have an addiction to alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever the thing is, we've got to break free from that. And the only way we can break free from that, I believe, is a relationship with Jesus Christ. Jesus is who equals freedom. And it's a growing relationship, but I tell people you can experience freedom in Christ. And so I've seen people, I mean, I was with a guy not long ago who told me he has been with over 600 partners. I was with a guy who told me up until his 40s, even on his 40th birthday, he went to Mexico. He got his wife drunk. She fell asleep, and he went downtown Mexico. He was in Cabo or Cancun, I can't remember, and hired a prostitute on his 40th birthday. You know, like I have heard some of the like darkest stories, and these people think that like when they tell me this story that they're like, Jordan's going to think less of me. I don't think less of them. I'm sad to hear their story. I'm sad to see whatever series of events had led to that situation. But like my immediate response is Jesus loves you and he wants to help you break free from your addictions. And so my encouragement to all would be, life can look different and you can experience freedom in Christ. And so I would say going forward, if sexual purity is a goal that you have for yourself, start today. Start today. It will make your future marriage better. It will make your relationship to your kids better. You know, I think of my daughter right now. I mean, she's 6, and it's like, she's going to be somebody's wife someday. Like, I hope men treat her with respect and honor. I think of my son, Koa. I hope he treats women with respect and honor. And why be with multiple partners prior to then one day being with his wife? So again, I don't want people beating themselves up for past sins. I would rather encourage people to jump into some scripture, get plugged into a local church, get plugged in with some other believers, and start to experience the freedom that comes with Christ. And I'm telling you, I've seen people overcome demons. I've seen people overcome bondage. And I've seen people break through and experience a better life on the other side.
Do you think intentionality and heart posture matters? And so what I mean by that is, okay, I'm going to walk this this new journey of sexual purity, but just because it sounds like it's the right thing to do, I'm just going to go through the discipline of what it takes. Rather than I'm going to do this because I want to get closer to Jesus. Does that matter in your journey to the afterlife?
So the two things you just described was behavior modification versus a relationship with Jesus. See, I think a lot of people have church hurt. Maybe they were raised Catholic. Maybe their mom and dad forced them to go to some church they didn't want to go to. I feel like a lot of the churches, specifically in America today, it's tradition based. It's like, you do this, these are the do's and don'ts, these are the rules, this is how you dress, this is the way you should live, and it's rules. But rules without relationship equal rebellion. And so when people ask me, they're like, are you a Christian? Even though I am a Christian, I know that Christian is a label, just like network marketer is a label.
Yep.
And I think people in their mind associate the word Christian with all the other people they've known in their past that called themselves Christians. And I think there's a lot of hypocrites. So when I'm asked what I am, I tell people I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. That's what I am. I'm a follower of Jesus. I love Jesus. I have a relationship with Jesus. And when you have a relationship with Jesus, your actions follow. I'll give you a quick example. Like, if I love my earthly dad, my dad's name is Dave. If I love Dave, my dad, I want to honor my dad, Dave, with my actions. So as a kid growing up, I tried to obey and honor my dad because I loved my dad. And the better, more intimate relationship I had with my father, it felt like the actions that I would take when I was in his presence and outside of his presence, I still wanted to honor my father. That's how I feel with Jesus. The more time I spend with him, the more I know about him, the more close I feel to him. I want to do the things that please him. So I tell people, Jesus loves you unconditionally, regardless of what you've done. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's pleased with you. And being pleasing is different than God loving you. His love is unconditional, but our actions dictate whether or not he's pleased with us. And so for me, rather than just telling a person to modify their behavior and just have sex with less people, there's no heart change. And if there's no heart change, that behavior modification will not last. If there's a heart change, now the whole motivation for making right choices has evolved into something different. Now we feel in the depth of our spirit that we want to do what's right because it's right. And that just happens to manifest itself in sexual purity.
Would you say that that's the difference between, so the guy that was on the cross next to Jesus, that he was a thief or a murderer or something, you could correct me if I'm wrong there. The argument is that he went to heaven because he...
I believe he did.
And if he... So what you're saying is that he didn't just modify his behavior because that's manipulative of just like, oh, I'm just going to say I believe in Jesus Christ, now I get to go to heaven. Your heart posture matters.
Yeah.
And God knows your heart posture.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. If that thief on the cross, let's just say, happened to survive the cross and didn't die that day, do you think his life would have looked different? I would argue it would.
Sure.
I think that it would have looked different because it was interesting because, Jesus was in the middle and there was a thief on both sides. And one continued to mock and ridicule Jesus until his death. And the other one said, no, you hush. This man is innocent. We deserve what we got. This guy doesn't deserve this. And he said, please remember me in paradise. Like when you go home to be with the Father, remember me. And Jesus looked at him and said, today you'll be with me in paradise. Like, I believe that Jesus knew that man's posture had changed. He recognized that Jesus was who he said he was. He really was the Son of God. So he recognized that he was the Son of God and he asked to be saved. I think in our culture, I think a lot of people know that Jesus existed. I think they think he was an historical figure because it's well documented, but they don't really believe that Jesus was the Son of God. They don't believe that there was a divinity there. Others believe that there was a divinity, and so their church has told them that if they just express with their mouth that Jesus was Lord, they can go live their life however they want to, and they've got this insurance card that's like a ticket to heaven. Yeah. And that's their understanding of faith. It's like, I said the thing, I got dunked in a tank of water, and I'm good. I'm saved. And so now, however I lived my life doesn't really matter. I mean, the Bible's very clear in Matthew 7. It says, many will say, Lord, Lord, and he'll say, I never knew you. Like, there needs to be, 1 John 3, 9, and 10 talks about how there's a difference between the children of God and the children of the devil. It says, by our actions, we will know who is and isn't saved. If you love me, you'll obey me. That's what I tell my daughter. I say, sweetheart, if you love mommy and daddy, you'll obey mommy and daddy. And the reason that we tell you to do the things we tell you to do is for your good, not for ours, but for your good. And so I do believe that when one truly has a heart posture change, there is an internal motivation to want to please God, to want to read his Bible and spend time with him in prayer and actually live the lifestyle that Jesus lived. And so we're told to emulate Jesus. That's why those bracelets, if you remember WWJD, those things were all over the place. It was like, ask yourself the question, what would Jesus do in this situation? That to me is the ultimate question every day. What would he say? How would he spend his time? What relationships would he be in? What businesses would he pursue? Who would he serve? How would he spend his time? Where would he give his money? Like, it's ultimately the question of like, how can we be more like Jesus? And I believe that that is the highest calling on all of our lives, is to be more like Christ. And so, again, whether you get saved early in your life or you get saved at the tail end of your life, God wants all of us to be saved. The most famous Bible verse we all learned was what? John 3:16. It says, for God so loved the world that whosoever believes in me, not the elect, not the Lutherans, not the Protestants, not the Catholics, whosoever believes in me. And so I want people to know that, like, ultimately God is pursuing all of us. But I think some of us have fallen into this lie that the world has more to offer. Wealth, sex, power, fame, those things are what matter most. And anybody that goes and pursues those things eventually gets towards the end of their life and they come to a place where, like, actually those things don't fulfill. And so the quicker you can figure that out, I think the better life actually is.
Now, couldn't agree more. Thank you. Very well said. On a day-to-day basis, we do live in the Western world, right? Like, It is extremely hard, even from birth at this point, to not be conditioned because of, like, it's deliberately programmed to pretty much remove us from God almost. It feels that way.
Yes.
How do we make such an intention to live and walk with Jesus in a world that almost feels like it is diabolically against that principle?
So I think the Bible talks about wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So you have to gain an understanding. You have to gain knowledge. The downside to social media and the internet is this, like, there's just like infinite amounts of things that we can access. On the flip side, that can also be harnessed for good. Mm-hmm. The preachers and the books and the audiobooks and the live sermons, like what we have access to at our fingertips with a smartphone is incredible. Like, we can literally watch or listen or learn from pretty much anyone. So I'm already thinking about the fact that, like, having young kids, they're going to be growing up in to your point, a diabolically different world than I grew up in. The challenges that they will face will be far different than the challenges I faced. And I think it's going to be an uphill battle for all. But again, my encouragement would be this. It's the same thing I tell business owners. It's kind of like what you do in secret is what determines your success. So I often ask myself the question, what are my spiritual disciplines? So my spiritual disciplines would be simple. It's like God has given me his word, the Bible, and it says that the word was God, the word was with God, and the word was God. So he has extended himself to us through the Bible. So I can learn about God through the Bible, and we all have access to that. I believe that we can also grow through community. So we have local churches, especially in the United States. There's one on every corner. Find a good Bible-believing church and be in community with other believers. No differently than you want to be in a community of successful business people to raise your business IQ. Like, you have to be around like-minded individuals. Praise and worship. I think that like music, we all know like music can make us feel different. There's secular music, there's praise and worship music, there's different types of music. But like, we can honor God. I think God has innately wired us to respond to music. There's something about the melody and the harmony and the words that can just like elevate us to a different position. So like, we've got praise and worship music playing on our Alexa at home. Like, we just fill our home with praise and worship because we want to honor the God that created us. Those to me are very simple things. And then there's even, you can take it a step further. Fasting is a practice that my wife and I practice. Again, it's not like we're trying to be overly spiritual, but it's just simply like, hey, if we can say no to food for a period of time and focus on God being our spiritual nourishment, it feels to me like food kind of just, saying no to food disconnects me from the world, and then prayer connects me to God. And so when you couple prayer and fasting, it's kind of like a superpower, in my opinion. But these are things that people could do in silence. They're not doing it out in the open. They're not showcasing that they're doing those things. That's just what I would call their personal spiritual disciplines. I try to increase the frequency of doing those spiritual disciplines. And as I pray and read God's word and worship him and spend time with a community of believers, input equals output, right? So what's going into my mind? It's different. I'm transforming my mind. So to your point, when the secular news stations and these media outlets with their agendas and some of the temptations that this world is constantly throwing at me, it's like, no, I have wisdom and understanding. I have a knowledge base of like, I can see what's happening here. I understand that there are two forces at work. I understand what Satan's agenda is. I believe that he is trying to usurp God's plans. I know that he's trying to convince people that God's not real. He's trying to convince people that Jesus doesn't exist, that Jesus doesn't love them, that you've made way too many mistakes and errors to be accepted by God. Like that's all his agenda. I'm aware of the agenda. I feel like I know the enemy's attack plan. So with that, I feel empowered and emboldened to then make right choices and try my best to lead others towards right choices. So if you're like, well, where do I start? I would just grab a Bible, start reading, just go through the New Testament, just start reading Matthew, just in the quietness of your heart, just start reading. If you're like, well, I don't know how to pray, just start talking to God like you talk to a friend. You don't have to some religious prayer. You know what I'm saying? You just talk to him. I talk to him when I'm in the car. I talk to him in the shower. I talk to him when I'm working out. I talk to him when I'm like trying to face a business decision. It's like, Lord, I need your wisdom right now. Can you help me? Or my son, it gets sick. It's like, Lord, can you help us? Can you heal my son? Like, I talk to him almost all day long, and it feels like that's very natural. So like my inkling or my first reaction to when trial or tribulation comes is, okay, Lord, I don't know what's happening right now. I don't know what this is, but like, I know you're in control, and I will trust that you know what's best, and I'll try to navigate this as best I can. But anything you can do to guide me in the right direction, I'm open to it.
Sure.
So that's just kind of my process.
Now, there's obvious scenarios where you could tell Satan's at work, right? Like in a lot of these, the political landscape, a lot of like the current events that are going on. There's a lot more subtle ones going on as well. Like, where do you think Satan shows up in the church?
Unfortunately, I feel like, I've researched this. There's over 34,000 denominations or sects of Christianity now. I don't think God ever intended for that to happen. He talked about having one body. Many members come together to form one body. But the problem is man got involved, and man is sinful. So when you have sinful people, they want their agenda. Their theology is right and your theology is wrong. And then they start emphasizing all the wrong things. And then the outsider looking in says, man, those Christians can't even get along. They're all fighting each other. Mm-hmm. It's no wonder that people don't want to be Christians. It's because they watch Christians fight with each other. So again, I don't think any of that was God's design. I don't think that was his design at all. I think that is man's error. So my encouragement to anyone that's even considering a relationship with Jesus is do not base it on failed human beings. Yes, there's some amazing humans out there, but like ultimately God is perfect. Jesus was perfect. Man is not. And man has tainted and made things wrong. I give you a kind of a simple example is like, look at the school system today. It is vastly different than the school system I went to. I went to a Christian school growing up. I got a great private school education, and I felt very proud of the education that I got and the school that I went to. We homeschool my daughter, and we homeschool my daughter because I don't believe in the school system anymore. It's not to say that there aren't unique scenarios and unique schools that are out there, but like, when it comes to the educational agenda and some of the things, that is outside my control. So we wanted to control that. So a very simple step that we took was to homeschool my daughter. Now, what's the cost of that? My wife's really good at making money. My wife's really good at business. So she had to pull back from business to prioritize homeschooling my daughter and eventually my son. There was a cost to that. But again, when we go through the filter of what matters most, stewardship of my daughter's little heart and helping set her up for success, we felt like prioritizing homeschooling was something that we felt called to do. So we did. So again, there's a cost. There's always a sacrifice. There's a sacrifice to saying no to certain businesses and business partners. There's a cost to going to certain places that you shouldn't be at. Like, I'm constantly aware of like temptations exist. I'm trying to put myself and my family in a position to win. And I don't always make the right choices, but as best I can, I try to create an environment and position us to win as best I can.
I love your take on homeschool because it's like, it seems like I feel whenever I have children, I feel called to some version of that because I agree with you. You have no control over the school system. And even when I was going to school, it was pretty much garbage. It's almost like they pretty much like deliberately removed God from the school.
Yeah.
But for as much as you're keeping your daughter away from things that you can't control, you're also, and I don't want to speak for you, but this my perspective, like you may also be not giving her exposure to some of the real world challenges she's going to have when she's off on her own, where like, I don't think we're ever going to get, like, we're not going to be able to hide unless we want to go like be Amish or live in random Montana. Social media, AI, all this stuff is only getting more vast. How do you manage that dichotomy as a father?
Yeah. So the good news is she's in a co-op. So she does get some social interaction with other homeschool students. So the co-op is twice a week. So there's obviously, if you choose the homeschool path, there are social opportunities. Yep. But I know that nothing influences a kid more than their friends. You'd like to think as parents, you're the greatest influence in their life. You're not. Mm-hmm. Your kids' friends are the greatest influence. So I can't even control the way you choose to parent your children. What do you think is acceptable versus unacceptable for your child? I've seen some kids with smartphones that are super young. They have access to screens and different things. And again, I'm not here to judge anyone's parenting, but the point is your parenting of your child can affect my child. So I believe we as parents also have to shield our children from some of their relationships. And we have to be very proactive at thinking through those things. So, you know, between church, between homeschool co-op, there's some other activities that we try to encourage Kinley to be a part of. Like she's in gymnastics, she's done soccer, like she's in environments where she's either a part of a team or, you know, she's doing something that is social. There's some really great homeschool gatherings. Like, you know, these dads take their kids camping once a quarter. So, you know, Kinley and I went homeschool camping with a bunch of dads and 100 kids. It was crazy. I don't feel like there's a shortage of social engagement for her. I just feel like we are controlling what we can control, which is the curriculum. We're controlling what she's studying, how she's learning. Like, we've taken a very proactive approach to her learning, which again comes at a cost. But it to us feels like we don't want to get to her being 18, 19 and look back and feel like, man, we regret the fact that we didn't do what we felt called to do. So, and I don't want to push any parents, like if I don't feel like everybody's called to this, but it's been interesting. My wife was one of the first to start homeschooling our daughter. And interestingly enough, her friend group, she's in a Bible study with like 10 women. I think now 7 of the 10 women in the Bible study now homeschool their kids. Like, they saw what Kristen did. They saw what it meant for her. Obviously the school system is evolving. So it's just been interesting to see that, like, this has been becoming more common practice, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I completely understand, like, controlling the environment, controlling what you control, but do you have a level of discernment on like how much control you take, given that, like, it almost seems like humans are naturally wired to rebel at a certain point? Like, when your daughter gets to her adolescent age, like, are you cognizant of the fact that...
Yeah, I mean, she's already rebellious in some ways.
Sure.
I would say this. We as parents, our job is not to modify their behavior. Like, here's all your lists of do's and don'ts, Kinley. If you do this, you're bad. If you do this, you're good. Like, no. Like, yes, there are rules. But again, rules without relationship equals rebellion. Mm-hmm. So my goal is to teach Kinley to be a critical thinker. My hope is that I teach her to think. So when a situation arises, she can process it on her own. So why would I make this decision? What does the Bible say? What is my upbringing? What do my parents say? So even when she does something wrong, something my wife and I try to do is we try to speak to her identity. For example, Kempers always tell the truth. That's who we are. You are a person that tells the truth. That's what Kempers do. And so it's not like I'm shaming her for telling a lie. It's like, no, I want to remind you of who you are. We're Kempers and we tell the truth. God tells us to tell the truth. We tell the truth. Something else is like, we honor authority. Even if you disagree with authority, Kempers honor authority. That's who we are. So I'm trying to instill in her an identity of who she is, so that when choices and decisions arise, she can think through, no, I'm very crystal clear about who I am. I know what my values are. I know what my values are not. And hopefully she'll be able to process decisions rather than going through a checklist of what she can and can't do.
Sure. Do you practice like a family governance structure? Like, it seems like, I know a lot of people that run their family almost like a business from a like core value standpoint. You mentioned like there are Kempers tell the truth. Like, it almost seems, do you guys have like a family constitution? And
yeah,
such?
We're working on that. You know, she's only 6. Koa's going to be 8 months tomorrow. So we're young, but like, I have mentors in my life that have like figured this out. There's a guy named Lee Deming. He wrote a book called Family Meeting. And once a year, he gets his family together. Now he has grandbabies, so like he's got a big, giant, extended family. But he does that. He has a whole process of like, what are the values of our family? What does generosity look like as a family? Like, they have a whole process. And then he picks some spectacular destination that all the kids and grandkids want to come to. And so he does an annual family meeting, and they have a process. So my wife and I do a vision weekend every January. We've done that for years. So that's kind of what we started with. And now as we're adding kids, we will probably more intentionally build out what that looks like. And we will probably run it a lot like a business, because that's what we know how to do. But like, I want to have a set of values that like, this is what defines us. And I want to have family rhythms. You know, this is, you know, this is what we do on Saturday mornings. This is what we do on Sunday mornings. This is what we eat dinner as a family. We pray as a family. We go on walks as a family. Like, kids thrive in routine. So anything that we can do to create routines and rhythms, I think will add so much value to our kids. And then we try to create experiences. Like, once a quarter, we try to take a family vacation. You know, day to day can be kind of routine and I don't want to say dull, but like monotonous. It's like just the same. But like, when you change the environment and you go on a vacation, now all of a sudden the kid has something to grab onto. Is like, this was different than a normal day. So we're just trying to create as many experiences and set our kids up for as much success as we can.
Yep. Do you know Rich Christensen by any chance? You ever hear that name?
That name sounds familiar.
He owns a company called Legato. And Roger probably knows him because Garrett Gunderson, that whole,
oh, cool.
Garrett introduced me to Rich, but Rich's entire company is based around creating that family governance structure, family crest, constitution. It's pretty awesome. So, one of our friends, Ben Greenfield, if you know Ben.
Oh yeah.
He practices that. He did a whole keynote for like 2 hours on his whole family governance structure. It's awesome. It inspired me to want to have kids fast.
Yeah, we study Scott Donnell is another one.
Okay.
He's got he's mentored 10,000 families. It's crazy. So we're getting to an age now where we're very proactively studying parenting and family governance and trying to figure out what rhythms we can create. And, there's things that my wife loved about her upbringing and things I loved about my upbringing that like, we're kind of just trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean for our family and what do we want to do? But again, the world says, make more money, shove your kids in daycare, send your kids off to school. They're going to be fine. It's like, no. We as parents have to be vigilant today about our kids' upbringing and filtering what they do and don't see and who they're around. And so we're trying as best we can to take as strong a proactive approach as we can.
Yeah, that's great. Do you think parenting and being a husband has increased your ability like to show up as a leader in the business, or do you think business and leadership had more of an influence on you being a better parent and husband?
Yeah, you remember we go back to the beginning, I said be, find, build. It's so interesting that like by becoming a husband and becoming a father, I became a lot more relatable to my audience. I built my first business, single up until I was 29, and I was just a freaking workhorse. Like I just grinded and I traveled. And so I felt like I was somewhat unrelatable to the average person that I was meeting because they didn't have that freedom and flexibility that I had as a single guy in my 20s. So I feel like getting married softened my edges, learning to die to myself and put another person's needs above my own on a daily basis. I needed that. I increased my selflessness. It increased my patience, my humility. It was like a lot of things that God used marriage to refine my character in a lot of ways. And then you add kids to the mix. There's a whole new set of things that you learn as a dad. So I felt like, yes, I became a better version of myself through those things. And I started to feel like I could interact and engage with the world at a higher level because, your average person probably is married or has kids. So I just felt like I became more approachable. I became a better leader. I became more empathetic. I became more understanding. I just felt like I grew into a better version of myself by becoming a husband and father.
You mentioned softening your edges. To most men listening to this, I'll talk to men specifically, that could probably sound horrible. I know what you mean, and I couldn't agree more. But explain what softening your edges means to someone who's literally just done things by brute force. And we've always been taught like, hey, don't show any emotion. Like disassociation has been the strategy until now.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that Satan has intentionally done is he's trying to emasculate men. So this whole gender crisis that we have in our country today is probably, we could talk for hours on this topic alone. I believe that God created man and he created woman. He created female. And I believe that we are wired differently for good reason. I think women should operate in the female. Men should operate in the masculine. And I think what's happened is you have this blending where men are being told that they're too masculine. So then they start to operate in the feminine. And women are told that like feminine is inferior to masculine. So feminine should operate in the masculine. And so you'll see these couples, you'll see these married people where they're not operating in their gender. And I think it creates chaos. Women are like, well, if my man was more of a man, I wouldn't have to be, the breadwinner and the disciplinarian and all the things. Again, so what to me is, it's like, when I look at the two genders, it's not that one is better than the other. It's just that we have to understand that these are two different genders with different roles. And so I try to operate in the masculine. So what that means for me is like, I believe that I'm the head of my home. I am the steadfast leader of my home. The Bible says that I'm in charge of the spiritual development of my household. It starts with me. And so not that a woman can't influence the family, she can, but nothing influences the family more than a man who knows what he's supposed to do. And so for me, I try to every day step into that role as the spiritual leader of my home. And I know I set the pace for that. And so if more men would be men, I think it would change a family. And I think if you change a family, you change a city, you change a city, you can change a country. Like, to me, more men need to step into that leadership role that they are. And so I'm not saying that women can't work. I'm not saying that there isn't a little bit of overlap of some things, but like for the most part, I've watched when my wife steps into the feminine. I mean, she is such a nurturer. She likes to nest, like the way she creates an environment and an ambiance for my kids, the way she takes care of the home. She takes great pride in that role. And so rather than fighting and friction, it's more of like, what am I designed to do? What are you designed to do? And how can we encourage each other in those equally important roles? So I don't know. As I think through that, I think men need to remember the way we're wired. We are warriors. We were hunters and gatherers. I believe that we're competitive. I think that we're driven. I think we should celebrate all of those things that come with masculinity. It's beautiful to celebrate. And so I think if more men stepped into that and didn't feel like they were stepping on somebody else's toes by stepping into their gender, I don't know. I just feel like they would show up as a better version of themselves.
How dare you misgender somebody on my podcast? Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, man. I don't even think it's a polarizing topic anymore. It's just facts. It's something that more people need to talk about. I almost feel like, and I'm not too caught up in the political landscape, but it feels like it's starting to shift because like our bodies are just not wired to feel this way. Like our nervous systems are heightened when you feel this because it's not how we were wired.
Yeah.
Like when you're in a household where the man is being the man and the woman is being in her feminine, like things feel right. They just do. And I can't claim, I don't have kids or a wife yet, so I can't claim to have a crazy amount of experience, but in the short of experience I've had in those scenarios, it feels like the world is healing itself almost.
Yeah. And there's times where, you know, I mean, my marriage isn't perfect. There have been times where like my wife would self-admit that like, you know, she steps into more of a masculine role. Oftentimes that's because she feels like there's a deficit coming from me. So if there's a deficit coming from me, she feels like she has to overcompensate by filling that void that she feels. So in any marriage, communication is important. And so when that situation arises, again, guilt and shame is not the response. It's open communication. Why do you feel that way? What can I do better? And as the man, I have to be very quick to apologize, say that I'm sorry, and what can I do better to improve it? And I feel like I do that pretty frequently.
What makes you mad?
What makes me mad? That's a good question. You know, it's funny. My friends kind of think of me as easygoing. I feel like I get mad when the things that make me mad are typically gossip and slander. Like when my character is taken through the mud, I feel like when I can think of the times that I've been upset or mad, that's one of my trigger moments. I don't like being misrepresented because I feel like I work so hard to have good character that when that is questioned, I feel like that makes me mad. Injustice makes me mad. You know, I'm funny in 2 weeks. I'm going to Tim Tebow's gala, and it's going to be a big fundraising opportunity to fight against human trafficking. And so I feel like the more I'm around those types of people that are following those types of proactive initiatives, I feel like I'm more empathetic to the victims in those scenarios. So like awareness of what's actually happening in the world, I get mad at what is happening, and I want to take a proactive approach at those things.
Yeah. Do you mind me? So like, let me pause there on that topic, because it makes me angry. Not even just mad, like pissed off when I hear stories like that. And there you have this Tebow energy to you, by the way. Just I don't know if anyone's ever told you that, but so I know he's a massive advocate for human trafficking and such. Like, it almost seems like in this day and age, like being angry and mad is like, there's like this negative connotation to where like we're not supposed to ever be angry or mad. Like, is it okay that we should collectively be angry at this concept?
Yeah, I mean, the Bible says there's righteous anger.
Sure.
You know, Jesus came into the temple and he was flipping tables. He was mad. He was angry. So I think, again, we live in a world that says you can't be mad or angry. That's not Christian-like. That's what they say, but that's not biblical. That's not true at all.
Yep.
I do think that our anger can get away from us, but I do believe there is righteous anger. You know, when it says that God is holy, what does that mean? Holy means set apart. It means sanctified. It means pure. And so anything that is not pure or set apart or sanctified, anything that is unholy, angers God. So how can he simultaneously love a person but also be angry? Well, it's because he knows that sin separates us from himself. So we're supposed to be angry when we see sin. Not like beat around the bush. Like, no. Sin separates me. Sin separates you. Sin separates people from God. So we are supposed to have an anger towards sin. I feel like the world doesn't do that. In fact, I've even seen pastors that are like afraid to talk about it. They feel like they're stepping on toes. But the truth is, I really believe with all my heart that like we should hate sin as God hates sin. Now, if we do sin, and we will, then we need to be very quick to repent. Just very quick. I did it. It was wrong. I'm sorry. And we move on. But to me, it's like, no, people just don't like want to act like it never happened, or don't want to talk about it, or we can't get angry, can't be sad, like be unemotional. So one of the things that we do with my daughter is we encourage big emotions. We encourage it. We never tell her not to cry. We never tell her not to be mad. We never, ever try to control her emotions. What she does with her body, obviously, is something she can control. You know, if she's angry, it's not appropriate to hit. But do we allow her to be angry? Yeah. Do we allow her to be sad? Yeah. And I think one of the mistakes our parents, meaning the generation of baby boomers, was they came from a generation where emotions, you weren't allowed to express emotions. So just bottle it up, like keep it inside. No, emotion is trapped. It's energy. So like that emotion needs to be expressed. And so we encourage my daughter to have big emotions. That's just an example of like, we encourage her to be angry. We encourage her to be sad. Like we want her to know that this is a safe place. And if you express your emotions in whatever way you need to, just know that you're not going to change the way we feel about you. And I think if kids could learn that, adults would start to learn that. You know, it's funny, like I've seen in leadership settings, my wife is very direct. It's kind of her reputation is like she says the thing that everybody else is thinking. Mm-hmm. So if they have a problem, they like to go to my wife because they know she will bring it up. I asked myself the question, like, why doesn't anybody else bring it up?
Sure.
Like if it's your challenge and you feel this way, why you bring it to Kristen? Why don't you just bring it up? It's like they're afraid that if they say the thing, somebody's going to be upset or disappointed, or they're going to step on toes and that person's not going to like them, or it's going to change the dynamics of the relationship. We need to get back to an environment where like people can speak freely. You know, that's one of the things I loved about Charlie Kirk. He was open to disagreement. He loved that people had differing viewpoints. Yet if you noticed with him in all of his videos and all of his talks, it was like he welcomed opposing views, but it was like he was able to have an open, honest conversation, and his opinion of the person didn't change based on their viewpoint. So I think if we could get back to like having open conversation and dialogue and feeling the freedom to be able to do that without the person changing their opinion of you, man, I feel like that would be better for everyone.
So good, man. Last question. You don't strike me as someone that wants to be remembered for what they've accomplished. Who do you want to remember? Like, who do you want to be remembered as? What impact do you want to leave on the earth?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's funny. So I just spoke last Saturday to, our company, and 1,600 people. And the topic that I chose to speak on was identity. And I shared the story of my grandfather. He died when I was 17. His history was he had PhDs in engineering and economics. He started a company and employed over 1,000 people. A very successful individual. Retired at age 57 and went full-time into ministry on his own dime, but continued to get speaking opportunities because of his accolades. In fact, like MIT, Purdue, some of the big engineering schools would bring him in to speak. And I'll never forget hearing about him waiving his keynote speaking fees if they allowed him to talk about his faith for 30 minutes. And so like he used the platform that he had to like teach about Jesus. He also was traveling and preaching at churches. And then I remember I was 17 when he died. I was sitting in the front row of his funeral. It was at a church in Rockford, Illinois, where we were from. And there was about 700 people in the church. I mean, who has 700 people at a funeral? And we had open mics at the front. And I remember people coming up to the mics and sharing what my grandfather had done in their lives. You know, one girl said, Harry paid for my daughter's prom dress. And another girl said that Harry paid for me to go to college. And like, I didn't even know who these people were. But it was like story after story after story of like tangible things that my grandpa had done in their life to make their life better. And I just remember thinking to myself, my grandpa's now in a box. He's gone. His physical body's here. His soul moved on. I'm going to be in a box one day. Who's going to be at my funeral and what are they going to say? And I had this epiphany as a 17-year-old boy that like that day is coming. And I don't think people like to think about their mortality, but I think about my mortality often. So again, trying my best to have an eternal perspective. What matters most? What matters most is that I love God and that I love others. And I don't just want to say that with my words. I want to do that with my actions. So I try to use speaking platforms, interactions, engagements, like whenever I'm around people, I try to be impactful. I try to be somebody that makes other people's lives better. But if I could say one thing that I hope people would say about me was, Jordan loved Jesus. And as a result of knowing him, I have a better relationship with Jesus. And if that could be said at my funeral one day, I feel like I will have won this thing called life.
That's awesome, man. You're the man, dude. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, man.
Of course, it's as always is Eli that's introduced me to these incredible people. So homage to Eli. We love you, man. What's next for you? So like real quick, I know you're playing this massively long game. What are some exciting things that are happening, and how can people connect with you?
So a couple fun things. We're looking at land in Tennessee. So we're hoping to buy a second home in Tennessee because we feel called to Franklin like everybody else.
Sure.
We've got 2 kids. We're hoping to grow our family to 4. So we're not done yet. I want to get my Make Wellness business to $1 billion in annual sales. My consulting efforts are continuing to march on. I build portfolios with various companies, and I do a lot of like tax mitigation work and different pursuits. So I love doing business development. And then physically, I felt like when I started having kids, I got a little bit lazy with my health. I think all of that trauma that I went through and some personal situations, I just kind of got a little bit lazy with some of my health goals. So, ironically, I've lost 30 pounds in the last couple of months, and I'm 41 going on 42. So by the end of the year, my goal is to dunk a basketball. It's been a few years since I could do that. You don't meet many short white guys that can dunk in their 40s. So like that to me is like a really worthwhile challenge of like knowing that like if I can pursue something in that physical way, it's amazing how our pursuits physically translate to mental, emotional, and spiritual. So I feel like I'm in multiple ways getting uncomfortable. And that's what I would encourage the person listening to say, like, comfort is the enemy of greatness. And if you are feeling comfortable, you're probably not doing anything great. So you have to be okay getting uncomfortable. And so I'm trying to get uncomfortable in my walk with the Lord, get uncomfortable in business, stretch myself. And then even physically, I'm trying to do something that I feel like is really daunting. But like this constant pursuit of growth is something that I never stop. So if people want to connect with me, man, I'm on all the social platforms at Jordan Kemper, Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. Man, shoot me a message. Love to connect with people, hear their stories, and figure out ways that we can add value to each other.
Let's go, dude. Well, thank you so much for coming on, man. Appreciate you pouring into our listeners.
Yeah, thanks for having me.